Hi, this is Judy Sarden. I'm author of Sarden's Practical Guide, How to Start Homeschooling. I also speak nationally on homeschooling and educational issues. I just got back from the Great Homeschool Convention, the Great Homeschool Convention's South Carolina convention, and one of the topics that I speak on at that convention is why Black children should be homeschooled. And I talk about this on my blog, which is www.thesardens.com, or just my name will get you there, judysarden.com. And so I talk about this. I actually have a blog post, why Black children should be homeschooled. But in this past, at this past convention, I had several white parents of Black children. Most of them had adopted their Black children. Some had biracial children. But most of the people who attended my workshop on why Black children should be homeschooled were white parents of Black kids. And so there was a common theme, and I've spoken about this several times. And there's a common theme whenever I speak about this and when people talk to me afterwards. So I wanted to record this video for anyone who's considering a transracial adoption of Black children. First off, I want to commend you on your tremendous courage to take on the societal pressure when you don't have to is commendable. I think it's just like with when you become a parent, there's no way you can even fathom what parenting is going to be like until you have a child. It's the same when you have transracial adoption. No matter how much you prepare for it, if you didn't grow up as a minority, if you did not grow up Black, you are not going to be prepared for the things that your children encounter as they're growing up. And it's not to say that you shouldn't do it. It's just to say that you are going to feel like you're missing something. You're going to feel like you're inadequate sometimes. But, I think at the end of the day, these children, like all children, if they're in a loving home, I think so much can make up for children being in a loving home as opposed to the foster care system. And that's just a fact. So I commend you for even jumping into it and for giving it your all, because every parent who I've spoken to, every parent who is engaged in transracial adoption is giving it their all, and so I commend you on your courage. One of the big issues, my kitty cat just jumped off. One of the big issues that so many parents talk about are the comments that they get from other people. So I wanted to address a couple of those. First off, the comments from Black people who will make comments to white parents of Black children. These are random people on the street who they do not know. These are people who they've never met before. And Black people will just make random comments. Okay, first off, if you're Black and you're watching this, I'm going to say, will you please leave these people alone? I don't know why, and I think it's a cultural thing that, Black people as a group, and I know people will disagree with me on this, and I don't care, but we feel entitled to interject ourselves sometimes when we really don't need to. So a big one is hair. Now, I know that a lot of white families will have a friend to help them with their child's hair, and they're working on it. They typically will have a trusted family member or trusted church member or trusted somebody to help them with the child's hair. So if you're some random person on the street and you see a white parent out with their kid and you don't think their hair is right, it's not your place to go up to them and provide your opinion. And I really wish people would stop. So that's one of the things that I really need to say to Black folks. Leave them alone, please. You make the child self-conscious, and a lot of times these parents have no idea what to say or even how to react. And I can tell you, I have a child with biracial hair. Her hair is nothing like my hair, and it looks a hot mess most of the time, but no one has ever come to me, no random person on the street has ever come to me and told me how to get my daughter's hair right. But it apparently happens all the time to white parents of black children, so just leave people alone. If you are a white parent and you are dealing with black hair for the first time, I would say find somebody, a barber, a hairdresser, find one person to help you with the child's hair. If you adopt the child as a baby, their hair texture is likely going to change a few times. And each time you'll just have to figure out how to deal with it. Don't let your friends, don't let anybody come up and randomly touch your child's hair. It's offensive. Your child is not a pet. And so if people come up to your child and try to do this, just tell them, please don't touch my child. For some reason, a lot of times, I mean, this has happened to my children, where white people will come up and want to touch their hair and things like that. And I realize it's different, but black people as a whole find that offensive. So don't let people do that to your black child. Unless they're there to actually do your child's hair, they don't need to be touching it. So that's kind of one of the things that I wanted to discuss. And another thing that I wanted to kind of mention, a lot of people, I speak at homeschooling conferences, and for the most part, and so I'm very passionate about homeschooling black children for a number of reasons. You can check out my website, and I have a couple of downloads that talk about homeschooling black children and teaching black history to black children. It's a totally different take on what you would typically get in the schools, and if you homeschool, is totally different from the Eurocentric history programs that you would typically purchase at a homeschool convention. So if you are a transracial parent who has black children, transracial adoption, I strongly recommend that you check out my downloads on why you should homeschool black children if you're not doing it, and also how to teach black history whether your kids are in school or not. But one of the questions that I'm asked often is, should I put my kids, if people are homeschooling their black children, should they put their children in public schools? And often these parents have been told by other black people that they should, in order to have their kids around other black kids, that they should put them in public school rather than homeschooling them. Well, my response to that is no. Just because you have black kids, just because you live in a predominantly white area, just because your church is white, does not mean that you should then put your children in black schools so they could be, and put your kids in public school just so that they can be around other black people. What I always recommend is, first and foremost, have your children around people who parent similarly to you. I think that's for anybody. It doesn't matter what complexion you are. That's the first thing. Surround your children, no matter what color they are, with people who parent like you, who have similar values to you. That's the first thing you need to do. Now, after you've done that, then I would strongly say, recommend being intentional. You must be intentional with finding opportunities for your children to be around people who look like them, but again, with the caveat that those people have similar values to you. So just to give you an example, now we are in several homeschool groups, but the one we do most of our stuff with, we're the only black family. But that's because we have similar parenting styles, we have similar goals, educational goals for our kids. Our kids like to play together. I am also a member of a homeschool group for African American families. So we do things with that group as well. So the person who started that group was actually a black mom who lived in a predominantly white area, who went to a white church, and her child was in desperate need of being around people who looked like her. And so she started a group. So if you are a white parent and you're wanting to get your black kids around other black people, I recommend that you start, first off, look and see if it's already out there. There are often black homeschool groups in larger metropolitan areas. There are biracial people who are homeschooling. There are people who transracial adoption people. And so I would say look for those kinds of families, or, go to the black organizations. Do find those. Be intentional about finding them. Be intentional about creating them. But first and foremost, no, just sending them to school, to public school, to be around other kids that look like them is not the solution, because again, at the end of the day, we homeschool because I've created a bubble for my kids, and I don't apologize for it. And no bubble is going to prevent them from having to deal with racism or any of those other nasty things that we would rather our kids not to deal with. But while they're young and they're forming opinions of themselves, they need to be in a supportive environment. I don't care if they're in a bubble. And so, I have not been able to shield my children from racism, but I do create as much of a happy bubble as I can, because in a few years, they're going to go out in the world, but at least when they go out in the world, they will know who they are. They will feel good about who they are. And so that kind of segues into the next thing, and probably the last thing that I'll talk about, which is help your child to know who they are. I think that is the biggest thing. When we have Black history, it's typically Black history is told as the slave narrative, the oppressed versus the oppressor narrative, and that's the only thing that children learn about themselves. And yeah, you can talk about Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and all those great people, but it's always oppression. So, and I talk about this at length in my download. Let's do better at helping our children feel good about themselves. Let's study the 5,000 years of Black history starting in Africa, and it's not just Egypt. Be intentional about finding resources so that you can really talk about the kings and queens that were from Africa, the wealth that's in Africa. Those are where your child's roots are from. And there are so many. I was talking to a woman who had adopted a child. She was Christian. She adopted an Ethiopian child and was not even aware that Ethiopia was like the first place that embraced Christianity after Christ's death. Within 10 years of his death, Christianity was firmly ensconced in Ethiopia. She didn't even know that. And so it's not to say anything bad about the mom. It's just if you're going to adopt a Black child, you need to be intentional also about digging up history. I mean history, I'm talking Black history. So, you study African history alongside the other history, from ancient times all the way up through modern, all the way up through the transatlantic slave trade. And then once you cover history of Africans in North America, that becomes part of 5,000 years of history instead of that being their only history. And when you change the narrative like that, you can really affect the way a child feels about themselves, because their whole history isn't slavery and getting fire hoses trained on them. And so, so again, I speak about that at length in my downloads on my website that you can take a look at. But I just want to wrap this up, and I could go on and on and on about this, but I won't. I'll be speaking at a couple other homeschool conventions, so swing by if you want to talk. I could talk about this all day, but if you are a white parent of adopted Black children, or a white parent of a biracial child, and you feel lost, and sometimes you question, what am I doing? I say that's okay, and I commend your courage in taking it on, because you don't have to. You can continue to live in your state of privilege, but once you've adopted that child and that child becomes yours, you will have to deal with things you never ever even dreamed of. So I commend you on that, and I want to thank you for being the awesome parent that you are and for loving those babies. And don't let anybody make you feel bad about what you're doing, because without you, who knows where that child would be. So good luck, and if you have any comments, please pop them below. If you want to send me an email, by all means send it to me at sardenquestions@gmail.com, and visit me on my website at judysarden.com. You can reach me at Facebook at judysardenspeaker.com and on Instagram at judysardenspeaker. Talk to you later.